let's talk about 10s for a minute, but not the kind of 10s that normal people care about, meaning hot girls. Let's talk about the type of 10s that you guys care about, meaning metal albums. You know, I'm not really much of an album guy. You guys know that in general, I'm more of a fan of singles. Even back in the day, you know, when I bought albums, I would typically make a mixtape with like, I don't know, the 2 or 3 best songs on the album, because very few albums, in my opinion, are worth listening to the whole way through. Usually, if you're lucky, you get 2 or 3 good songs on an album, and then you get 7, 8, 9, 10 tracks of filler. But today, I will share with you a few more albums that I believe are perfect 10s with no skips, that are actually worth listening to the entire way through. So that's what I'll do for all you album stands out there. Today is your lucky day. And really quickly, I also wanted to mention my Patreon. If you like what I do on YouTube and everywhere else, joining my Patreon really helps me do this full time and worry less about videos getting demonetized by YouTube or copyright claimed by labels. Patrons get all my podcasts and main channel videos early. There are members only channels in my Discord that I'm super active in. I also do giveaways. For example, I've been giving away a lot of Emo's Not Dead merch, and you can also have me review your music, artwork, or anything else. All you need to do is join my Patreon at the $10 level, and then every month I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something, just drop it in the comments of that post, and then I will review it live on Twitch. So if any of that sounds cool to you, hit the link in the description of this video, and I appreciate your support. So the first album that I would consider a perfect 10, in my opinion, is the self-titled album by New Found Glory from back in 2000. This is their second album, their major label debut. I mean, you know right off the bat, you've got Rachel Lee Cook. If you didn't have a crush on Rachel Lee Cook in 1999 or 2000, then there must be something very, very, very wrong with you. Also, you got him. I mean, look at this guy. How many of us were doing this in 1999, trying to jerk off on a 56K modem? You got to wait for the shit to load, you know? You're like, oh, damn it. My mom picked up the phone right before her nipples loaded. Oh, mom, how could you do this to me? Yeah, but this whole album really just absolutely, it's classic, you know? To me, this album was like the absolute perfect snapshot of what it was like to be a down bad suburban punk rock dork trying to get laid. Not even trying to get laid, because that's like more aggressive. This is just like, you're not even trying to get laid. You just want the girl who works at the caramel corn stand at the mall to like you back. You've been going to the Orange Julius at the mall every day for the last 4 months just because you want to see the girl who works there. You've never even said your name to her. Yeah, you just want to hold hands at the fair with her. Exactly. That's what this album is the soundtrack to, is being that guy in 1999 or 2000, which I definitely was. And the whole album, you know, to me, the thing that New Found Glory contributed to this sound, meaning the TRL pop punk sound, Blink, New Found Glory, Sum 41, Simple Plan, I would say, you know, that's sort of the definitive bands in the genre. What New Found Glory brought to the table was kind of a little bit of like a hardcore sensibility, because I think everyone knows this, but their roots are in the South Florida hardcore scene. You know, Chad was in Shai Hulud, and, you know, they all just sort of came up in that scene. And they were on Eulogy Recordings before this, which was a hardcore label. So they brought that to the table that I think made it, you know, sound it had a little bit more groove, a little bit more of an edge than those other bands, but still like very pop at the same time. Truth, this album was very popular at my Christian school. Actually had to tell people what the condoms on the cover were. You're like, okay, yeah, I can explain what the things on the cover are. Like, how much do you need me to explain here? Do you understand? You know, when a man and a woman love each other very much, they do a special hug. Like, do you know about this part? You do? Okay, good. You know about the special hug that your mommy and daddy do on his birthday. Okay, you know about that. Great. Well, if your mommy and daddy don't want to give you a brother, well, then he'll put one of those balloons on his wiener. That's what those are for. And someday after you're married, you'll learn about this too. But yeah, I mean, I think this whole album is really just an absolute classic of the genre. It's one of these albums that a lot of the stuff from back then, you listen to it and it gets dated and maybe you're like, this isn't as good as I thought it was back in the day. But this is one of those albums that I think just gets better and better with age, in my opinion at least. Obviously, I'm an old man and I'm looking at it through, nostalgic rose-colored glasses, obviously. But I really do think it holds up. I think it's great. I think it's a perfect 10 in the sense that there's not a single song on the album that doesn't hold up, in my opinion. And the same is true. Their third album, Sticks and Stones. I would say, it's really a toss-up which one you like better. I would say, to me, they're both 10s. Sticks and Stones was their breakthrough with this song, My Friends Over You, which got big on TRL and all that stuff, and that's kind of the thing that really blew them up. But either one of them are both great. I feel like you can't go wrong. And if you're into, the peak of 2000s TRL pop punk, definitely check this album if you haven't. It is 10 out of 10. Next up, we have, in my opinion, the pinnacle of skate punk, or really of like 90s quote unquote real punk, I suppose. So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes by NOFX, which I think this is from 1999. I think this is it. Punk in Trouble is great too, but I think this is better, personally. Now, there's no doubt to me that NOFX are the absolute kings of this sound. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, everybody likes NOFX now, and for good reason, as they should. But we took NOFX for granted. I think we did. Yeah, the drumming is insane. That guy is so fucking fast. I remember a friend of mine back in, 2000 or something like that, was taking drum lessons. He had just barely started to play drums, and his drum teacher was like, well, bring me something that you want to hear, like, and I can help you play it. And he brought this album in, and his teacher was like, yeah, I can't help you with that. Because that guy is fast as fuck. This is the new dad rock. I mean, that is true. That is true. Unfortunately, now this sound is for like the Huntington Beach, boomer punks, that still wear black flies and Dickies shorts, unfortunately. But it is also a fact that NOFX was the most important, like, quote unquote, real punk band of the 90s. Like, no question. Obviously, bands like Green Day and Blink and The Offspring, and like, they were legit bands, but, they were mainstream bands. They weren't seen as legit punk back then. And NOFX were the kings of punk in the 90s. There's just no question about that. And I feel like they don't really get credit for that now. I mean, I people do obviously like them, but I don't know. I feel like they're like kind of underrated, if that makes sense. And I think this album, to me, was the peak of their sound. Other people might say Punk and Drublic. I think that's, a valid choice, but I feel like this album was where they really perfected it. Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of a snapshot in time. Lagwagon is better. Yeah, it's interesting. Lagwagon has become a total Punisher band now. It's interesting. So back in the 90s, NOFX, Lagwagon, Strung Out, any of that stuff, back in the 90s, were seen as basically poser shit for like snowboarders who shopped at Zoomies, which was not wrong. I mean, that is sort of their main fan base. But it's interesting now how Lagwagon is seen as like a credible band, which, I mean, Lagwagon is great, but like the idea that like you could be taken seriously if you liked Lagwagon is insane to me. They were just completely laughable in the 90s. Like NOFX was barely credible in the 90s. Lagwagon was just completely, like, the pinnacle of poserdom was listening to Lagwagon. So it's interesting to me now that nerds have sort of decided that they love Lagwagon. Propagandhi, yeah, Punishers love that band too. It's interesting to me that Lagwagon and Propagandhi seem to be kind of the bands now that Punishers jerk off to, and it feels like people don't give NOFX the respect that they deserve. But like, no question, there's zero question, NOFX are the absolute kings of this sound. There is no question about that. Like, it cannot be debated. When it comes to 90s punk, NOFX is the definitive 90s punk band, period. And in my opinion, that album is the best in their catalog. So Mike said they just ripped off Bad Religion. Yeah, well, I mean, they did. They have a song called I'm a Very Big Fan of Bad Religion. They ripped off Bad Religion, and they also ripped off RKL and Propagandhi. But the thing is, they wrote better songs than any of those bands. Obviously, they borrowed from a lot of those bands, but they wrote better songs than any of them. Also, this is not relevant to, like, NOFX necessarily, and this being a 10, but Fat Mike doing Fat Records back in the 90s, which is still around, obviously. Like, Fat was I would say probably like the most important, not even probably, they're definitely like the most important punk label of the 90s. So you got to thank him for putting on all those bands like Propagandhi and Lagwagon and Pennywise and all those other bands that were on Fat Records. Like Fat Mike is the most important person in 90s punk, period. You know, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like people don't give him credit for that. Like maybe people kind of know that, but I don't know, do they really know it? Fat Mike is like the man. So yeah, that album also a 10 in my opinion. Now, switching things up a little bit, an album that people may be surprised to hear me praise, because I have a pathological hatred and allergy to anything related to indie or anything related to hipsters, anything like that. You know, if you can imagine people drinking craft beer when they listen to it, or if you can imagine people listening to it while they make French press coffee, I probably wouldn't like it. But I'll tell you what I do like that does kind of fit into that category is the first album by the 1975 from back in 2013, I think, right? Just, God damn it, this album was good. This album was just an absolute fucking masterpiece. These guys are mid? Hell no, they're not mid. The 1975's new stuff is mid, and he seems like an asshole, but this album is anything but mid. Incredible. What makes it a masterpiece? Well, I'll tell you a few things that make it a masterpiece. Number one is these are just incredibly catchy pop songs, but you can kind of tell that they don't take themselves too seriously, and it's got a little bit of an edge to it. It's got that sarcastic kind of British sense of humor to it that kind of, you know, makes it a little bit more than just like, you know, I mean, 2013 pop was corny as fuck, right? Like Chainsmokers and stuff like that. This definitely, you know, has just a little bit of an edge that made it, to me, a little bit cooler than that stuff. But yeah, snotty in a good way. Yes. Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. I heard this when I was waiting for my wife outside the Forever 21 dressing room. I heard this and I was like, oh, damn, this is good. Who is this? And I looked up the lyrics, and it turned out it was 1975. And I've been listening to this album obsessively ever since then. It's just God tier pop songwriting. In particular, I would say one thing I really like about this album is the drumming. Very good, like dancey, funky kind of drumming. Yeah, sometimes you need something light and fun, not dark and brutal. Yeah, I agree with that. This is what Paramore sounds like now. I think it's like a better version of Paramore. To me, this is like obviously picking up where something like the Talking Heads, you know, or Gang of Four left off, even kind of like Prince or something. But I think of the Talking Heads as really kind of being their main touchstone, I guess. Or In Excess, yeah, In Excess, Fine Young Cannibals. Yeah, sounds a lot like In Excess, you're right. But man, this album is just, it does not get any fucking better than this as far as like pop goes, you know, guitar pop, which is very hard to do. Usually pop with guitars either goes too hard on the guitars and it ends up being like just kind of like bland rock, or like it, you know, but they really just struck that perfect balance of pop. Yeah, and it's not disco either. Exactly. It's just, it's really hard to do like dancey guitar pop without it becoming disco or indie, or it's a very narrow lane, and I think they found it perfectly with this. And the singer does seem like kind of a turd, but doesn't take himself too seriously, at least in this video. Yeah, well, back when Maroon 5 was good, yeah, they were great. Yeah, I don't really love anything else they've done after this. I definitely don't like their new stuff, but this particular album is a fucking masterpiece. I would highly encourage you to check it out if you have any interest in pop whatsoever. The production of this album influenced pop 10 years at this point. That too, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure, this whole like kind of throwback, like reverb heavy kind of sound, I think that this is the album that brought that sound back too. So yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't. Now, on the metal side of things, I've said before that I thought the Avenged Sevenfold City of Evil album was a masterpiece, which I do. It is an absolute 10. But I also think their self-titled album is a 10 as well, even though they kind of switch things up a little bit. It's really, to me, whether you pick self-titled or City of Evil, both of them 10s, just in different ways to me. Love this album. Tasty drumming there. The era of Avenged Sevenfold, when they were still wearing the Death Bat fedoras with the Affliction jeans. Bring it back, Matt. Bring It Back. This album was a little bit of a departure from City of Evil, because what happened is that after City of Evil, which, you know, ended up being their breakthrough album, they got super popular, went on tour with lots of bands and stuff, played a bunch of big shows. I think it was like with Metallica. I think they opened for Metallica a couple times. And they played some big festivals in Europe and stuff like that. And what they found is that the stuff on City of Evil wasn't really translating so much in the live setting, because it was just too over the top. It was too complicated. And so for this album, they made a conscious effort to write stuff that was a little bit more like subdued in terms of like, you know, I mean, City of Evil is just fucking crazy. It's all over the place, totally insane. And so for this album, they said, let's write stuff that grooves a little bit better and translates a little bit more into a live setting, which I think they did. Explain Little Piece of Heaven. Yeah, so but that's the cool thing about this album, is that even though they did make a conscious effort to kind of calm things down a little bit and make a little bit more accessible and groove oriented, they still like did crazy shit like Little Piece of Heaven. So it's not like they walked away from that completely or anything like that. They just calmed things down a little bit. And, you know, I think I like City of Evil better, I think, because it is a little bit more crazy and over the top. But this album is great too, just in a different way. Legitimately, this album is a masterpiece. To me, City of Evil, self-titled, it's really a toss-up as to which one is the better album. Matter of personal preference. They are both 10s. That's what I think. And the last one, which I feel like this is going to be the most controversial choice here, Lover by Taylor Swift, which was really the conclusion of her pop era. God, I love this song and this whole album. You are somebody that I don't know. Just peak Max Martin era. God, the vocal harmonies and shit are just fucking incredible on this. God tier songwriting, God tier vocal arrangements. It's perfect. I'll tell you why I think this album is perfection. Obviously, Taylor Swift started out as, you know, a country artist, although she was really only barely country. It was really like a lot of pop and a little bit of country, or like pop with a twang. And she kept getting a little bit more pop with every album. 1989, I think, is the one, or was it Red? I forget which one. But that was the album where she sort of officially decided that she was going pop. I think it was Red. Yeah, this is the one where she was like, I'm going pop. And the country people were mad because she was no longer sort of the flag bearer for country anymore, whatever. And with this album, she just went, there was like not a trace of country on this album. This is like just the absolute like purified, distilled essence of like polished mainstream pop. Yeah, I agree with this. This probably brought an end towards this type of pop, though, because how could you top this? Alt pop took over after this. Yeah, you can't top it. You can't top it. It's like, it's perfection. Now, what's interesting to me is I feel like it's Folklore, the album after this, is the one that really put her over with the indie crowd. That's when she, in my opinion, started to become kind of boring and uninteresting, and her songs just sort of like what her like Lana Del Rey phase, when she decided she wanted to be Lana Del Rey, is when she got boring. However, I do understand it's like she basically perfected pop on this album. What else could you do? You know, yeah, it's nerdy white guys love boring. It's true. They definitely do. This whole album, just back to front, is absolute pop perfection. And, you know, there's some people in the chat who seem confused about this list. But if you know me, you'll know that I am basically a purist. I like every genre, but I like, say, 2 or 3 things in like every genre and probably not much else after that. Right? If it's death metal, I'm going to like the top 2 or 3 artists in death metal, and then I don't need to listen to all the mid stuff, right? And so to me, the reason why I love this album is because it's basically the perfection of pop. How could you possibly top this? If you like music, you shouldn't be blinded by genre. You shouldn't be like, I only like whatever, pop punk or death metal or hip hop or whatever. Like, you should just like good music. You know, as Jimi Hendrix said, there's only 2 kinds of music, good music and bad music, which I agree with that. I mean, that's how I see it. And so to me, if Suffocation is the perfection of brutal death metal, which I think they are, this album, Lover by Taylor Swift, is the perfection of polished mainstream pop. And so for that reason, I call it a 10. I know Pitchfork and Fantano and, You know, all those people probably would say that it's Folklore. That's probably her best album, but I disagree. I say it's Lover. I say it's a 10. So that does it for this edition of Perfect Albums. Join me next time for another 4, 5, or 6 albums that I believe are perfect 10s. And someday after you're married, you'll learn about this too.